teen contemporary group. This is The Anatomy of Grief.
Show yourself to me. Show yourself to me. Show yourself to me. Show yourself to me. The anatomy of grief. I'd like to explain to you not only the anatomy of grief, but the anatomy of my grief. A shape, an anatomy, a body, a form of grief. Take a form, grief. Show yourself. I'd like to explain to you not only the anatomy of grief, but the anatomy of my grief. My grief, my grief, my grief. Shock, guilt, anger, depression, acceptance. Phase 1. Shock. Shock is a critical condition brought on by the sudden drop in blood flow through the body. Show yourself to me. Show yourself to me. Show yourself to me. Phase 2. Guilt. Responsibility for having done something wrong and especially something against the law. Against the law. Against the law. Phase 3. Anger. A strong feeling of annoyance, displeasure, or hostility. Phase 4. Phase 4. Phase 4. Depression. Depression is a mood disorder that causes a persistent feeling of sadness and loss of interest. Sadness and loss of interest and loss of interest. A shape, an anatomy, a body, a form. A shape, an anatomy, a body, a form of grief. I'd like to explain to you not only the anatomy of grief, but the anatomy of my grief. You look as though you have taken on the form of a walking state of grief. You look as though you have taken on the form of a walking state of grief. Shock, guilt, anger, depression, acceptance. Shock, guilt, anger, depression, acceptance. You look as though you have taken on the form of a walking state of grief. A shape, an anatomy, a body, a form of grief. Phase 5. Acceptance. The action of consenting to receive or undertake something offered. The anatomy of grief. A shape. An anatomy. A body. A form. Of grief.